My guest today is Thiago Payva, EdTech and Higher Education Specialist focused on business development in Brazil and Latin America. He's been in the game of education for over 18 years with a focus on higher education and the EdTech industry in Brazil and Latin America. I haven't been that connected to Brazil. I've only been to the BET Brazil fair in 2018 once, which is the largest innovation and technology for education event in Latin America. And I would love to be able to get back and learn more about the country. And one of the things that I do have done is to follow Thiago for a few years, and especially since his time as VP of Education at HolonIQ and working with the Inter-American Development Bank and its lab, where he was mapping the entire EdTech ecosystem in the region for the creation of the report Educational Technology in Latin America and the Caribbean in 2021 to 2022. So today I'm very eager to dive deeper into his background and experience, as well as to get an update on the situation in Latin America and in Brazil in specific. So it's an honor to welcome you to the podcast, Thiago. How are you doing?
Thank you so much, Johnny. Thank you so much for having me. I'm doing great. What about you? How things are going?
I'm great. So spring is coming in Finland, and we've had a long winter, and we're looking forward to having more sun. So maybe Brazil has the sun that we're waiting to get here in Finland as well.
Absolutely. I'm sending the major warmest sun for Finland.
Thank you. So let's start with your personal background and your path into education as a profession. If you like to start maybe from your own studies and take us forward.
Perfect. First of all, once again, Johnny, thank you so much for this opportunity. I believe that having this conversation will be fantastic also because there is so much going on in Brazil and also in Latin America. But let me share a little bit of myself. I have been working, as you mentioned, in the education industry itself for 2 decades, basically, most of the time in the higher education industry. But since 2020, 2021, I was able to have the opportunity to go deep in the EdTech ecosystem in Brazil and also in Latin America, especially when I have led this project at the HolonIQ with the Inter-American Development Bank. So through the years, I was able to see lots of examples of entrepreneurs, of case studies that are improving and able to help education itself, not only in Brazil, but also in the Latin America. So during those 2 decades in the education industry, it's been absolutely an amazing experience. Also, because different from other professionals, different from other roles, working with education, it's something pretty unique. Or working with education, the education ecosystem is pretty unique. You are able to see the impact that education do in the people's life, especially here in Latin America. So it's amazing. It's an amazing industry, as also you are pretty familiar with.
Yeah, definitely. And can you go deeper into your transition, maybe from education in general towards, let's say, EdTech in specific? Like, how do you see the opportunities with educational technology, first on a general level, to maybe solve some challenges in Brazil? And you might want to highlight some of the challenges that you've experienced in the education system in general in Brazil.
Perfect. We can say, like, for instance, just to give you, and also for the audience, a little bit from what is Brazil. So Brazilian numbers, today we have a population from a little bit more than 200 million people. So it's a huge country. Also, we have some major challenges. Speaking in Brazil, we have almost 10% of the population that are not able to reach the higher education. They are not able to go to the university. So you see this huge gap in the education ecosystem. We have this enormous number of people from almost 5% of the population can't read. So this is a pretty high number of people that are not able to read. So you can imagine the entire impact of those numbers, and you can imagine how this impact our society. So I have been working in the education, higher education industry. So you see that how people change their lives when you have a degree, especially in an economy as the Brazilian economy. So with that experience, with that background, I was able to, when I started to go deep in the EdTech industry at HolonIQ, I was able to see the challenge, the gaps that these two industries are having. So during my time at HolonIQ, we saw this number that in a survey that really pops up our eyes, that the most difficult challenge for the EdTech entrepreneurs in the adoption of EdTech solutions from universities, from governments, from schools. It was facing the challenge to digital transformation, of the adoption of this digital transformation, and also the challenges is the resistance to change. So the culture of the resistance to change are huge. So in the other hand, you have a pool of solutions, a pool of entrepreneurs, a pool of technology that are willing to help, are willing to improve other sectors. And the other hand, you have governments, you have universities, you have the schools. They are willing to have this support, but at the same time, their inside culture, it's a barrier for this kind of adoption. So it's a pretty impressive number and a pretty impressive data. But at the same time, you see that this, especially after the pandemic, Johnny, I believe that this is a very interesting turning point, that after the pandemic, as we perfectly can remember, 4 years ago, we were out of the blue, we were having lockdowns, we were with the need to everything involving education to go fully online. At the same time, here in Brazil and other few countries, a couple of countries in Latin America, we have the schools here were shut down for, I believe the data was around 18 months. This number is one of the highest days of schools shut down in the entire world. So you can imagine all those challenges that the sector has been going, and the impact for the children, or for the impact of people in their learning process. You can imagine how hard that was. Also, speaking of that challenge during the pandemic and the adoption of barriers and digital transformation, a couple of months ago, I had the amazing opportunity to be invited by the UNESCO and have the opportunity to be in the extraordinary meeting of Ministry of Education of Latin America in Chile. And there, one of the main topics, it was the impact of the pandemic in their learning process of millions of people in Latin America. At the same time, how technology can improve this process from now on. So once again, I believe that it's a lot of opportunities, a lot of things to do in Latin America, that we can combine education and technology.
And where do you see that the largest impact has been so far with technological solutions in education? And where do you see that there's the largest maybe opportunity still where technologies still haven't been helping much where it could? And what would be the factors that are slowing? You mentioned the resistance, but other factors that might be slowing this process of actually taking advantage of the opportunities with so many technological solutions. Because I want to highlight that Brazil probably has among the most educational technology companies per country in Latin America. Of course, it being a huge country, like a continent, as I usually say. So whereas I focus on the Spanish-speaking Latin America, Brazil is like a separate continent within Latin America. But all these companies with technological solutions, you can also categorize them into edtech companies that have, let's say, research or science-based methodologies behind them, or just technology solutions that are just making things easier or helping, or maybe not helping even if they're too complex for teachers to understand. So to summarize again, my question is a little bit, what opportunity do you see with technology still, and where has it been maybe the most impactful so far?
Perfect. So let me give you also a quick numbers about the EdTech industry itself. So as you mentioned, Brazil is a continental country. It's huge. It's their magnitude and their numbers. So in Latin America, we have a little bit more of 1,500 companies, EdTech companies in Brazil, EdTech companies. And basically, 55% of those EdTechs are located in Brazil, are Brazilian EdTech companies. Right, the second and third places would be Mexico and then also Chile. At the same time, you have the challenge of how to break those barriers for the adoption of EdTech solutions. At the same time, Johnny, also a pretty interesting number in Brazil, when you're talking about the tech ecosystem in Brazil, for the very first time, we have more EdTech companies than, for instance, fintechs, govtechs, or proptechs. So this is huge. The Brazilian Association of Startups recently published a study that shows that in the tech ecosystem in Brazil, almost 11% are EdTechs. And the second position, they are the fintechs with a little bit more than 9%. So this is huge. This is amazing information.
Yeah, let me just add that my understanding has been that EdTech in general, at least the last few years, have been about 10 years behind the development of fintech regarding everything. So this is really an amazing number.
Yeah, absolutely. But on the other hand, talking about also about these numbers, the major founding rounds are for the fintech companies. So you have the most of tech companies in Brazil are EdTechs, but you can easily say that 80 to 90% of the funding rounds are going to the fintech companies. But at the same time, we can say from this pool of EdTechs in Brazil, you have those service providers, the SaaS providers, or even though the CRM companies that are doing implementation of CRMs, or even though of LMS, for instance. But also, Johnny, we have quite a few EdTech companies there. I would say they are doing a different type of work. When I mention this different type of work, I'm saying about going precisely to the problem. Not that other EdTech companies are not solving problems. They are, for sure. But quite a few EdTechs are helping to go exactly where we have this major problem in Brazil. As I mentioned it when we started the conversation, almost 10 million of people are not able to read in the country. Almost 10 million of teenagers, of adolescents, are not able to reach the university. So there are quite a few companies that are using AI implementation to teach kids to read and learn. So at the same time, we see this movement. They're able to go, okay, how can we solve the major problem in a country so big, so huge as Brazil? And also how those companies are able to impact the EdTech ecosystem itself. So, for instance, we are seeing this boom of AI technology, and I pretty believe that by next year, by 2025, by the next 2 years, by 2025, 2026, we are going to see the real impact of AI in the EdTech ecosystem, in the EdTech solutions. Because nowadays, still, we are in the early stages of AI implementation, but the next 2 years, I really see that things are going to move really fast, and the impact of this technology adoption, it's going to be huge. It will be probably a game changer in the education itself, not only in Brazil, but also in so many other countries in the region, also in the entire world.
Yeah, and if you go back a little bit to the reading skills or the lack of literacy skills in general, do you know why that is the case, the decline? I mean, if you would look at the development of society, also children using more and more, let's say, sophisticated technology and other ways of communicating in general. And in modern countries such as Finland, there's of course, clear lack of motivation and interest and understanding of why I need to learn to read, maybe. So I like to start with, let's say, digging deeper into the why there's a problem, why the problem exists, rather than seeing how we can fix it. Like with AI, we could fix it. But if a child doesn't want to learn to read or doesn't see the reason, no technology will help. But so we try to motivate kids. Let's say in Finland, you don't have to start learning to read until you start primary at the age of 7. So there's a very slow, let's say, academic progress from early childhood. In you have the preschool year where you try to start with the basics, but really individually try to find people's development and readiness level, and then you enhance the skills through interests and so on. And of course, you still have the reading skills as mandatory in Finland as well. And now even there's policies of enhancing the time for reading skills and basic mathematics skills and so on because of this worry. But my point is that I think a lot of decision makers still don't understand why, and then when it might be appropriate. But then Brazil is a completely different story. I mean, especially if you look at the poor sectors of Brazil, people might still need or want to learn how to read. But why would you say that has declined in those areas? And can you simulate, let's say, the general problem that in general,
sure,
worldwide, the reading levels are lower than 10 years ago?
Yeah, absolutely. We also are really able to see in the PISA mapping that those numbers are decreasing. And also, of course, we have the impact of the pandemic in this low rate of people that are able to read right now. But especially because, Johnny, we can say here in Brazil, talking about specifically about Brazil, the public policies. So basically, we are not able to create as a country a long-term public policies focusing in the education. So it's something that is breaking down every 4 or 8 years, and we don't have a continuity of this implementation. So just to give you a little bit of how different or how unique Brazil is, in the major of countries in the region, we have people studying in public schools and going to public universities. Most of the countries in the region do that. But in Brazil, for instance, we have people studying in public schools and going to private universities. It's the opposite. So also just to give you a little bit of numbers, in Brazil, you have almost 8 million of students in the higher education industry, in the higher education universities, from public to private. And 80% of those students are in private universities, are not in the public universities. So you see how unique is the market in Brazil, and how. But you can ask me, Thiago, but why this is happening? Why someone that had opportunity to be in a public school are not able to go to a public university? That's because you have private university of excellences in Brazil, of course, but basically most of people want to go at a public university because they don't have to pay, of course, and also because of the quality. At the same time, when someone goes to the public school, they are not able to go and have the learning of excellency. So they have to go to a private university, and also with the help of governments, with public loans to go, or public policies to go to a private university. So you see how different it is Brazil, how pretty unique it is Brazil. And at the same time, right now, the government, it's doing another round of public scholarships. So this is something pretty good, because Brazil wants to see people able to study, because only with education, Johnny, you are an example of that, since you live in Finland. Only with education we are able to impact and change our societies. Only with education we are able to have more knowledge, and also having more knowledge, we are able to expand the economy. You are able to create technologies. You are able to change people's lives. You are able to take people from the poorest areas and have a decent life. Only with education. Only education. It's this tool to change societies. So I hope that I have answered your question.
Yeah. So let me go deeper.
Pretty unique.
Yeah, I understand. And let me ask a follow-up to that. So if you look at the private sector versus the public sector, both in basic education and also in higher education, what would be the most adoption of technological solutions in the private sector in basic education, or the public sector, and then also in higher education in public or private sectors, respectively? So what impact, if we go back to the impact question before, so what impact has technology had so far, and what is the adoption, let's say, if you compare the different sectors?
Well, I believe that if we compare the different sectors as private and public, first of all, you have the public policies. When you talk about public, you have the public policies. That's a little bit more complex, especially in the adoption. So we have some ground rules for these adoptions. When you talk about private, you don't have this layer of process of adoptions of technology. At the same time, the private sector, it's already ready, or has find an easier key to have the adoption of those solutions. For instance, in Latin America and also in Brazil, you have still have a huge challenge about connectivity. So when you talk about in technology, it's still unfortunately dependent of connectivity. So in the private sector, this barrier, it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist But when you're talking about the public, even though in the higher education or in the K-12 industry, you still have this huge barrier of connectivity, especially in rural areas that suffer not only in Brazil but in different countries from the region to have this adoption of solutions. So with less connectivity or even though mobile devices, you have this huge barrier in the adoption of technology. So with the right timing, with the right public policies, I believe that easily those the implementation would be much more easier.
Yeah, and then also we know that technology in itself is not really the complete solution, and also sometimes it might even block the real solutions. And now in modern societies, we talk about the addiction to some technologies that we want to start avoiding and cut back on. And maybe we talk about going back maybe 10 years even in the adoption of some technologies, such as social media for young kids that are causing maybe more harm than good. And my question is about the technologies in Brazil that have maybe helped when it comes to actually developing life skills. If we go to skills also as something that we want to have developed maybe beyond just subject memorization, such as creativity skills, collaboration skills, communication skills, and these kind of more modern 21st century skills, where most of those skills can also be developed initially, if we talk about basic education, without technologies. And sometimes technology adoption, especially in modern countries, happen maybe too fast. And also I know from some developing countries where you have government contracts investing in, let's say, laptops for everyone, but then you still have the same problem. Let's say you have one laptop for every kid, but they still don't learn how to communicate with each other, collaborate with each other, think critically about what they do. There's no creativity happening. And then you have AI killing all creativity that maybe were still there when you get bored with a laptop. So we also know that internet per se is not really a big problem, but it's really the social media addictive, let's say, algorithms that cause maybe negative behavior or too much of screen time towards unproductive purposes. So I would want to go beyond technology in a sense also in this question to see where you see that we have a lot of things that we can still impact with or without technology, but focusing on the skills development rather than only, let's say, reading skills or mathematical skills.
No, absolutely. And Johnny, I believe that our society it's going through a disruptive era of information, of behavior, of technology. We can easily say that the last 10 to 8 years, things has changed in a much faster pace than 20 years ago, from the 80s to the 20s. And between the 1980s and the 2000s, we see the adoption of internet. We see the adoption of portable technology. We saw the disappearing of physical data to everything becoming on the cloud. And now we see kids and we see a full generation that is already born in this area. And part of the biggest challenges nowadays, I believe, that has been this gap of generations. And we say gap of generations, we say gap of skills. So as you perfectly mentioned, the time on screen is something that it is changing the way how this new generation, the Z generation, it's adopting how they learn. It's changing how they use, for instance, a computer. I recently read a very interesting article saying that some people from the Z generation are taking their parents for interview jobs. So where these social skills are changing, what, you cannot imagine asking, being in an interview and you're taking your parent with you. This new generation that is with the skill of skills about how to use a computer, because everything is on the finger, everything is on your thumb. It's on a mobile device. So it's at the same time you see how companies focus on skills you are able to help and to create opportunities. But none of this, Johnny, are enough if the society itself see, oh, are we going too much? Are we, allowing too much screen time for our kids? How can we, say, oh, no, this is not time for you to be in front of the computer or in front of your cell phone. Go outside, go play outside, go create the social skills with other people. You're not going to say like an emoji or LOL for someone in a text. You're going to exchange this. You're going to be able to understand what is frustration. You're going to be able to understand that things are not going to move in the pace that you want, because this is not how society works. Society, it's not your screen. Society, it's something much broad and much more complex. So that this is a pretty interesting thing about where the society is going right now with the technology. So we are talking about technology, about education technology, and how this can improve people's lives. And also, on the other hand, we are discussing right now how technology at the same time are taking off basically skills that you and I have been developing since we were born, that right now this generation are with a lack of it. So it's a pretty interesting thing.